Welcome to On the Mark. I'm your host, Mark Rubin. I am so excited to present this podcast series addressing our rapidly changing world and how it is affecting industries and people in unique and interesting ways. As John F. Kennedy once said, change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. The business leaders and personalities who I will be interviewing in these podcasts certainly look to the future. And I hope you come away with information and inspiration that helps you adapt in both your business and personal lives. You can find these podcasts on all major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, getsplatzer.com. Welcome to On the Mark. My name is Mark Rubin, and I'm your host. And we have an exciting episode for you today. We're dealing with the issue of entrepreneurship and what it takes in a changing world to be a successful entrepreneur. With me today, I have Tomo Delaney, the founder of Noshi.
Nice to meet you.
He's had a journey that I think started around 2015, so it's almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And some people think that to be an entrepreneur, you just need vision, an idea of what you want to do. But it takes a lot more than that. It takes perseverance. It takes adaptation, because nothing ever goes in a straight line. There's always bumps in the road that happen. There's always ups and there's downs, and there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of disappointments. So that's some of the things we're going to discuss with him and how Tomo has adapted to that, to these issues. So Tomo, welcome to On the Mark.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little about the journey that you've taken since 2015.
I don't even know where to start. It has been the wildest ride. We all eat food every single day, and we all shop for food at least once or twice a week. And even I find it remarkable that people don't really need to think more about how those food products came from wherever they came from to being on your table. Every single brand has a wild story. Even brands that are huge household names, they all started in the same place. They all started over somebody's kitchen table, and the journey each brand takes is nothing short of remarkable. And you talk about tenacity. Yeah, it's you've got to have some of that. That's for sure. And
so tell us a little about the product that we're talking about. We haven't even addressed that, but what is Noshi and what does it make today? And then we'll go back to history.
Today, we make savory condiments for children.
Right.
Ketchup, chicken sauce, and ranch dressing. Every child's 3 favorite condiments. And we all know how much children love condiments as well.
Right.
But 10 years ago, the reason it started was because I was suddenly a stay-at-home parent. I'd been working in the fashion industry for 20 years. And I suddenly felt like the oldest person in the room and sort of like I shouldn't be there anymore. So I used that as an excuse to become a stay-at-home parent when our second child was born in 2010, which was joyful and blissful and perfect and fantastic in every respect, except for the fact that neither of my kids was very interested in food. And we can describe it as picky eating, but I don't really think that does justice to any child, because I don't really think that it is picky eating. I think the root of the problem, which is something I discovered at the time, which is what inspired me to start Noshi, is that children feel powerless at meal times because they're told to stop playing, stop playing with their crayons, stop watching the iPad, stop watching YouTube, and come and sit at this table and eat this food that I have cooked for you. And if you think about it, it's no different really to being in a dead-end job as an adult. If you go to work every day and your boss has no respect for you and expects you to sit down and do work that isn't very inspiring all day, every day, you turn up and you do the bare minimum. But if your boss respects you and gives you more and more autonomy and power and trusts your ideas and listens to your ideas, it becomes much more fun, basically. And so my kids weren't interested in getting up to the table. They weren't, they've never rejected broccoli, for example, but they just weren't inspired by food. And what I wanted to do, sort of having prided myself on, a lot of parents do this nowadays, more and more parents do this nowadays, but I'd always treated my kids as equals. I'd treated them as, I'd spoken to them as if they were adults. We had dealt with stuff as if we were equals. That was my approach. And so I didn't want to have that cliched butting of heads every time we had to have a meal. And that was becoming increasingly more and more frequent. So I wanted to find a way of bringing them into the conversation. And so I did some research, and the research was very clear, very easy to find. I found it in about 5 minutes. And it said, if you give kids more responsibility in the preparation of their food, either in the kitchen or at the table, they're far more likely to eat it because they've stopped to think about what's gone into it, the effort and the ingredients. And they respond to that. And they also respond, of course, to being given more responsibility at the table. And if you think about it, the reason kids love condiments is because it's the only time during a meal that they're actually given anything tangible to do, something to hold and to, to feel trusted. And so it was like a light bulb moment to me. And a friend, sort of simultaneously, somebody I'd been speaking to about it, she had ironically been watching an episode of Shark Tank where two women had got a deal from one of the sharks for a product which was basically crap in a jar. It was neon colored edible cookie dough, and it was full of fake colors, fake flavors, sugar, awful stuff. And they got given a deal. And my friend Peggy was infuriated by this because it was so unhealthy and it was aimed at kids. So she started to think about an alternative to that was potentially a kid's food product that was based on color, not flavor, but that was organic and healthy. And she and I sat down shortly after that, and we came up with the idea for Food Paint very, very quickly, which was the product that gave me the inspiration to launch Noshi as a company, which was this. It was a little box with different, the tubes were this sort of size, and it had 6 of them in there with different colored and flavored organic fruit and vegetable purees. And that was the product that I decided to launch with.
And obviously you changed at some point from that. And why did you do that? What made you have to change the product?
A number of things. I still firmly believe that Food Paint is a potentially billion-dollar idea, but I am a one-man band. I've always been a one-man band. I've always worked with extremely limited resources, effectively nearly always just friend and family investors until recently. And I just never had the money to do it justice. If you're trying to sell a product based on color to children or to anybody really, the colors need to be amazing. And of course, if you're selling an organic product, you can't add artificial colors to it. So the colors were always very muted. And I still think that if, for example, General Mills handed it over to their food science team, or Kraft Heinz handed it over to their food science team and said, make these colors organic, but unbelievably attractive, I'm pretty sure they could do it. The other thing is that Food Paint, kids understood it immediately and could not wait to get their hands on it, because you said to them, we built this for you. It's designed for you to use. Look what it is. It tastes delicious. It's different colors. You can paint faces on your pancakes. Kids loved it and understood it immediately. Their parents didn't, partly because, of course, it would involve them spending money on a product that they hadn't historically bought before, but they also didn't really understand the appeal of it, which I immediately understood the appeal of it when it was described to me and when we sort of came up with the idea. But that's a big problem, of course, because the kids aren't buying it, their parents are buying it. And I think if we had a $2 million marketing budget to explain to parents why children loved it so much and what the thinking was behind it, I think that would have probably worked as well. But of course, I'm sitting here burning money, and we didn't have a $2 million marketing budget, and the colors weren't as good as they should have been. And ultimately, it's a long and meandering story, and it's just another chapter in the crazy story of Noshi. What happened was that just after I was on Shark Tank, my wife, who I talked about being sick while I was on Shark Tank, she got better from long COVID, which is what she'd been sick with previously. And just as we were going into production with Food Paint to put Food Paint into 2,200 Walmart locations, she got sick again. And the whole month of production that I should have been overseeing from the factory floor, that month I spent in hospital helping my wife recover from endocarditis. And so it just imploded. And when the dust settled, when we came home from hospital and we'd missed all of our Noshi deadlines, and the repair costs to my machinery were getting bigger and bigger because the staff at the factory weren't able to learn how to use my machinery without me there to help them understand it. It was just a perfect storm of disaster, basically. And the dust settled, and I really had to face facts that, it was a defining moment. And it was, you talk about adaptation. I had historically always read interviews with brand owners who had pivoted because obviously, it was my new specialist subject, and I find the industry fascinating. So I would absorb founder stories. This is why How I Built This is such a popular podcast, because the stories behind brands are so fascinating. I had always sort of scoffed at the idea of pivoting, because I would think, if you've got a brilliant idea and you believed in it enough to bring it to life, why would you then abandon it? And suddenly I found myself in a situation where I didn't really have any choice but to abandon it, because
let me ask you a question. So the reason that you pivoted, was it simply a financial reason, or was it because you thought that the product couldn't be marketed the way that you originally wanted to market it? Because I think originally, as I understand it, you did two things differently. One, you were buying licenses, so you had some licenses and you were marketing under some licensing names that were recognizable to the public, right? And that's correct. And also that the initial idea was to make eating veggies more palatable to kids.
Yeah.
And then you went from the veggies you pivoted to the condiments. So those were two major changes, I think, from your initial concept of the product.
Yeah.
Can you address why? I think you addressed it to some extent. It was a financial decision; you just couldn't do it. But could you address why you made those two pivots?
Yeah, basically, the licensing thing sort of was handed to me on a plate, for want of a better expression. I had met with a guy here in New York with a view to him potentially investing in Noshi, and we both discovered fairly quickly that it wasn't the right fit, but we had breakfast and we got on really well. And I had taken boxes of food paint with me to show him. And when we were leaving, I said, "Oh, you can hold on to those, and please feel free to give them to any friends you have with children, because I'd love to get feedback on them." And he said, "I'm not going to give them to friends with children. I'm going to give them to my wife, because she is the head of licensing at an extremely well-known kids TV show." And when he said the name of the kids TV show, I was like, "Oh, licensing." And then I imagined the characters from that show on the front of the box, and I was like, that's what I need. This is what I need to validate the product. I need something that parents trust to give, and something that they'll spot on the shelf to give them the confidence to buy this thing. And if their kids are sitting in the grocery cart and they notice it simultaneously, that's just a bonus. But this is a way for me to reassure parents that this is a legitimate product, that, with legitimate branding behind it in the form of this kids TV show. And I was like, wow. And he said, the thing is, they very rarely take on new license deals. He said, if you do hear from them, it won't be for months, because they do a huge amount of due diligence. And he said, so don't get your hopes up. But if it does happen, it won't happen for a while. So I went home and promptly forgot all about it. And then a couple of months later, suddenly I got an email from this guy's wife saying, "Hey, nice to meet you. We love your product. We'd love you to come in and talk about this. We're really excited to do it." And so I went in to see them all at their office in New York, and it was amazing and exciting. And I was like, wow, this is really the start of a new chapter. And I left.
Was this before Shark Tank, or this was after Shark Tank?
No, this was
before.
This was just after we had started selling in Walmart. So it was at the end of 2019. And I came home from that meeting and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is something I hadn't even thought about. And and this has happened similarly all the way through the evolution of Noshi. Things have just happened fortuitously for the most part. I mean, obviously a lot of stuff's happened that's been disastrous, but often things have happened just when they needed to give me the confidence to keep moving forwards. And I came home from that meeting and it was really exciting. But then they phoned me about a week later and they said, "We're really sorry, but one of our other licensed partners, who is a huge kids food brand, has discovered that we want to do this with you, and they have told us we can't." And that was devastating, because I said to them, I said, "I thought your due diligence process was really extreme and that you would have caught this before talking to me." And they said, "We thought that the contract we have with the other brand was clear of what you're doing, but apparently there's crossover and they're not happy about it." So I then came off that call thinking, my God, my brand's dead, because I had we had been planning this launch basically. And I spoke to my packaging designer in London, who had been mocking up packaging with that show's characters on. And she said, "Look, don't worry about it." She said, "That show's, nobody's heard of it in the UK." She said, "If you want to build a global brand, the license partner you should talk to is Peppa Pig. And so that's why I ended up talking to Peppa Pig. And I went to meet Peppa Pig's people at the New York Toy Fair a week before COVID shut down New York City. And I signed the contract with Peppa Pig a week after COVID shut down New York City in Peppa Pig's very deserted office in Tribeca.
You also had, I think, Crayola as a licensee at one point,
Yeah,
right?
and of course, what happens with license deals is you release one, and then suddenly you have all these other brands coming to you and saying, "Oh, you do licensing. We'd love you to do licensing with us." And Crayola came out of the blue in that way. And we laughed about it on our first phone call. I'm like, it's an obvious fit, and of course it was, because ultimately we were selling Crayola food paint, and it just looked like squeezable crayons. And I thought it was a stroke of genius. So everything in February of 2023, as I say, we were poised for great things. I firmly believe that, we could have taken over the world, but stuff happens. And of course I had to prioritize my wife's health. And it was just very, very unfortunate that the timing worked out like that. And the net result of it all was I lost a huge amount of money, because I was paying tens of thousands of dollars to have my machinery repaired. We missed all of our Walmart deadlines. I had to pay extra freight charges to get our product into Walmart that I wouldn't normally have paid if we had not missed the deadlines.
So at this point, were you just a one-man band? You had no assistance in the business at all? You were doing everything?
I'm still a one-man band. I've been doing it on my own for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So what happened around that time, the dust was settling, my hair was standing on end, and I was, it was like a cartoon character, like when you've got soot, gunpowder on your face and your hair standing on end, you don't really know what's happened. I got emails from customers who were buying, we were selling ketchup in tubes this big as well. And they said, look, my kids love your ketchup. They love the branding. They love your approach. I love the approach that you're taking, like giving kids responsibility at the table. They said, but it's really expensive. We can't afford to buy it. But if you put ketchup in big tubes, we would definitely buy that. And I combined that with a lot of the stuff that Mark Rubin had said to me on Shark Tank, which was to say, he had said, you're trying to get people to buy a box with 3 or 4 flavors in it. People don't necessarily always want to buy 3 flavors when they have if they have the choice of buying 1 flavor. He said, I think you should be selling single tubes, which I thought was really good advice. Because apart from anything else, selling this in this format has 4 layers of packaging. There's the tube, the shell, the cell unit, this. Then there's a caddy on the shelf in the store, and then there's a master shipper, the brown corrugated case. So you've got 4 layers of packaging, and each of those layers costs money. Whereas these only have 2 layers of packaging. They have the tube and the brown corrugate master shipper that it's shipped out to stores in. So,
but let me ask you a question. Take the ketchup, for instance. Ketchup is sold in bigger, Heinz, for instance, or some of the bigger companies. They sell ketchup in squeeze bottles, bigger squeeze bottles.
Yeah.
It may not be as attractive in the packaging, but how do you distinguish? And it's not organic, and you're an organic product. But how do you distinguish yourself when you're marketing this from someone just buying the products in a squeeze bottle?
Well, that, apart from anything else, the fact that it looks so different. A 24-ounce bottle of Heinz ketchup is huge, and it's so big that a grown-up has to use 2 hands to pick it up a lot of the time. This is so manageable that even a 2-year-old child can pick this up with 1 hand and use it, which, my brand was set up to sell food products that kids could use themselves. It was to give kids more power at the table, more autonomy. So the tube format at the beginning, when the tubes were this big, made complete sense, because you can just do this with it. So when we switched to bigger tube, to a bigger format, I felt very strongly that we should stick with the tubes, because I wanted children to be able to use these products. And so that's why we did. The other thing that was really interesting, when I spoke to the ketchup buyer at Walmart, who I had an amazing years-long relationship with Walmart, and we're on very good terms and parted on good terms. When we were sort of having our conversation about these products, the category manager, the ketchup category manager at Walmart, said something brilliant. He said, your customer is a mum. He said she runs through our store, almost literally runs through our store. And she's got one child with her who's screaming because they're hungry and that she's on her way to pick up two more kids from school or from soccer practice. He said she needs to be able to spot your product from 20 feet away down the aisle and immediately understand what it is. And by the time she's 10 feet away from it, she needs to have made the decision already as to whether she's going to buy it. And by the time she gets to your product, she either sweeps it off the shelf into her cart or she ignores it and moves on. He said, what you're doing here with these is brilliant. He said, because you are giving her the chance to spot this product from a long way away. And it's very obvious what it is because it says it on the tube, and it's a product she already buys, so she understands it. He said, your previous product, food paint, I understand what you were doing with it. He said, but when you're talking about a box that's this big and it says food paint on the front, even if it's got Peppa Pig on the front of the box, he said, you're asking that mum to stop, having noticed it, which she probably hasn't because it's so small. He said, but if she's noticed it, she then needs to be interested enough in that product to stop, pick the box up, look at it, read the back of the box, and then decide, work out what it is and why she should be buying it, and then decide whether she wants to buy it or not. He said, you're asking too much. And
so
the
consumer makes a decision in a store, just in a matter of seconds. You don't have more than a few seconds to. That's why at grocery stores you see the things that are at the checkout. There are very specific types of things. Well, I know you're no longer in Walmart. Your whole distribution channels have changed also. That's been a difference in your product, that you're no longer using those large chain stores. Can you tell me a little about why you migrated from the Walmarts of the world?
Well, we sold at Walmart for nearly 5 years, and we sold food paint at Walmart for nearly 5 years, and we didn't sell a huge amount for the reason I've just discussed. It was hard for people to spot, and then it was hard for people to understand. But Walmart stuck with us. I went to Expo West at the beginning of 2019, which is a huge organic food show. It's the biggest organic natural food show in America. And I stood there behind my little booth, and nothing really happened until the end of the last day. And a very, very young guy walked out of the crowd and was very interested in the product. And we talked for a long time. I didn't know who he was. And then he took a box of product off the table, handed me a business card, and walked off into the crowd. And he'd already disappeared by the time I looked at the card, and I looked at it and it said Walmart on it. And I was like, oh my God. And to cut a long story short, we launched into Walmart 6 months later. I had done no legwork. None of the legwork was done by me. None of the running to them was done by me. It happened completely organically, for want of a better expression. And it just happened, and it was wonderful. And they obviously saw something in the product. They saw what I had seen in the idea when it was presented to me. So we sold only in Walmart for nearly 5 years until the spring of 2023, when everything went wrong, basically. And we would probably still be in Walmart now if it hadn't all gone wrong.
Well, what went wrong? What when you say went, at that point, COVID was over by 2023.
I'm talking about the month when I should have been in Rhode Island, and I ended up spending the month in hospital with my wife.
Right.
Everything comes back to February 2023. That's when everything went horribly wrong. But of course, I was, we talk about tenacity and perseverance, and the fact that I've been doing this for 10 years. The thing that's kept me going is when you read founder story after founder story after founder story, there's one common thread, which is the only ones that succeed are the ones who refuse to give up. Right. And so I have always prided myself on finding my way across the ice, no matter how thin it's got or how loud the cracking becomes under my feet. I have always managed to move forward across the ice. It's been absolutely terrifying on a number of occasions, and in many ways just continues to get more and more terrifying, because the longer you're in this game, the more money you're spending to stay in the game. But in the summer of 2023, all of the pieces of the jigsaw in my head were slotting into place, because I was thinking, well, Cubans saying sell individual tubes. I've got parents saying sell us ketchup in bigger tubes. We know that kids love ketchup. So the conversation I had with Walmart makes sense, because it's a product that mum's going to not only understand, but something that she already buys. I can't just launch ketchup as a standalone single SKU. So what other sauces do children love? And everyone loves Chick-fil-A sauce, and every child on the face of the earth loves ranch dressing. So that was the family of sauces I set out to launch.
Now, when you made that decision, did you do any research, or that was just intuitively, or your expert experience that these are the products that kids would want?
It was just being a parent and listening to my children and their friends, and watching them at meal times, and watching them when we had food out, and the fact they asked us to walk a mile out of our way to go to Chick-fil-A because they love Chick-fil-A sauce, and my wife and I are both British. Ranch dressing is not something we were familiar with really until recently, but suddenly somehow both of our children were world experts on ranch dressing, and they were extolling the virtues of ranch dressing on a daily basis. And so it was very obvious, I want to make condiments that appeal to children, and we need a little family of them, because most stores won't take a single SKU because they want your brand to have as big an impact on the shelf as possible. So we need to offer them at least 3 SKUs, and those are the 3 we're going to do. And so those were the 3 we did do.
And did you have to pay for shelf space? Some stores require you to pay for shelf space or for stocking. Did you have those issues? Did you have to face?
It depends from store to store. Different chain stores have different processes, I suppose, but yes, I mean, it is just part of the game. They're called slotting fees, and normally it involves giving each store a free case of each SKU, which of course, if you're going into a chain store that has 7 locations, that's not bad. But if you're going into a big box store that has locations all over the country, it becomes completely untenable. I mean, I had a meeting with Walmart. Never charged. Walmart were amazing to work with. I loved working with Walmart. It was eminently affordable from my perspective, and they were lovely, lovely people who are very, very good at their jobs. But I had a meeting with another big box store like that, another national chain store, and they said, we'll do this, we'll take these products, but you're going to have to put this much product into each of our stores to make that happen. And ultimately it would have cost me $220,000 just to get the product into their stores. And there wasn't a way in hell of me being able to afford to do that. So it didn't happen.
And now, the way that you're marketing the product now, is it mostly online? Is it in smaller stores? How are you selling product?
Well, I was given the impetus to actually make these sauces a reality by a distribution company who had discovered them at the beginning of last year and were very keen to distribute them. And so that, knowing that was there, was what gave me the confidence to move forward and actually put the sauces into production. It's quite interesting comparing that with what I was doing at the beginning of 2017. And actually, to be honest, it was the same distribution company. They expressed an interest in the product. That was what gave me the confidence to move forward and make the product. So distribution companies don't sell your product. They're not brokers. They don't go to stores and say, will you sell this product of this brand that we distribute? They are just there to facilitate your distribution. So you still have to do a lot of the work yourself. But having said that, we launched these stores in November of last year. And because they are available to find in our distribution company's literature online, we do pick up new stores every day. I mean, our store count goes up every single day. At the moment, we're I think in just over 100 stores, which is good. I mean, when Food Paint launched, we knew we had orders incoming from 112 stores. And so that's what gave me the confidence to go out and buy a tube filling machine, for example, and, spend the money on the ingredients and the tubes and the other 3 layers of packaging. You do have to make big, scary decisions, often months in advance of you ever seeing any revenue back in to cover the costs of those decisions. But that is the nature of the game, unfortunately. I'm not selling jars of honey in my local farmer's market. I'm trying to sell consumer products into hundreds of locations around the country. It's not cheap.
And where do you see the company going? What's your vision for the company in the next few years?
Well, I mean, I think any brand owner of a CPG, consumer packaged goods product, who says they wouldn't quite like to one day be acquired by a bigger brand is lying. I think, the end game for any small brand nowadays is acquisition by a bigger brand. And generally speaking nowadays, there is a trend towards that, because if you think about big legacy brands, whose products have been around on the market for 10, 30, 50 years, they are starting to look a little bit old-fashioned in their approach. And how can they not? Their infrastructure is such that they have to keep it moving by selling products that they know people buy. But they're also looking down, and I don't mean that, they're not looking down in a derogatory way, but they're looking down on smaller brands like us and seeing the interest that we are generating and the difference in our approach. I was invited by a big brand to go and speak to them in their office about why I was doing this and why I had decided to do it and why my approach was potentially different to theirs and potentially stuff they could learn from. So they are watching small brands, and they do, there is definitely a trend for those big legacy brands to acquire smaller brands and grow in that way nowadays.
And what would they be interested in acquiring? It's not there's nothing, I guess, patentable about putting condiments in a squeeze bottle. There's the name Noshi. That probably has some value in itself. There's your expertise and your experience. Maybe they would be interested in that. But what do you think would be what would interest a big brand, one of the major players, to want to acquire you rather than just knock you off?
Very easy answer to that. Your mailing list and your revenue and your, what's the word I'm looking for? Them having some of your sheen rub off on them. You're doing something that's different, and people are noticing it and people are buying it. And the big brands not only want your revenue and to take you out of the game as a potential competitor, they also want to be seen to be having new ideas and be doing stuff that people might not expect of them. They want to, they can't be seen to be falling behind. They need to be seen as on top of their game and staying on top of trends and different approaches and profiting from them ultimately.
And is there like an amount of business that you have to be showing that you're doing, volume of business, to get them interested? In other words, if you're not doing enough volume, I would think they wouldn't be interested. Is there a point that you have to get to in order to interest them? Is that something they've expressed to you?
I think everything you just said is true. And that's why it's scary, because of course, in order to generate that revenue, you need money, you need a marketing budget, you need to make sure that your products are available to buy in as many stores around the country as possible. And you need to make sure you have the money available to tell people that they are there. I think DTC online sales is something that you can make money doing if you're lucky and the cards fall in the right sequence, and you have, products go viral on TikTok, for example. I'm an old man basically, so we have a TikTok account. I posted a video on TikTok a couple of weeks before Christmas, and the whole concept of posting content around my products has always terrified me, because I know I'm not my target customer. So I've always been very, very worried about, whether I'm doing the right thing. And I posted this video on TikTok and turned off TikTok because I was too scared to watch it not grow. And then I checked in with it about 8 hours later as I was going to bed that night, and it had 45,000 views, which was extremely unusual. Normally my videos have like 100 views after that time. And so I was quietly encouraged by that. And the next day woke up and the video had 140,000 views. And by the end of that day, it had 1.7 million views. And that was amazing. But A, people don't trust TikTok Shop to buy food products at the moment. And B, the whole idea of me selling my products online is tricky, because They are very heavy. They've got 10 ounces of ketchup inside them, so the shipping isn't as cheap as it could be. And that's expensive. So, yeah, the general thinking, I think, is that most CPG brands make at least 80% of their profit in bricks and mortar retail stores. And so that's where I'm focusing my very, very limited resources. And as I say, you know, we've got a national distribution company that can put us into thousands of stores, but I need to tell those thousands of stores we're here, and they need to understand why they should be selling my ketchup and my chicken sauce and my ranch dressing.
Are you looking to expand your product line to other products, or are you staying with these 3 products?
I certainly would like to launch a range of organic jellies in the same tubes with similar branding. I think that's an obvious, you know, wet place to expand. It's very hard to find organic jelly for kids in this country. And you know, at the beginning, when we were launching Food Paint, the original plan had been to put 3 fruit flavors and 3 vegetable flavors in the box, but the production cost would have been ridiculously high, and I had to make the decision to take 3 of those flavors out. So I took the 3 vegetable flavors out. My thinking being, look, we're still selling kids organic fruit, but we need these flavors to be flavors that we know all children are going to love immediately. And I think trying to, you know, get ahead of ourselves and sell organic vegetable puree to kids is absolutely something we want to do, but it's not something I can afford to do right now. So, you know, we want to make sure that the products you're selling are going to appeal to your target customer, who is a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old kid.
Are you open to or actively looking to have people come in as investors or actively involved in the business itself?
Yeah,
to help grow the business?
Yeah, every conversation I have in this industry, I find absolutely fascinating. And I normally say it to whoever it is I'm talking to for the first time. I could carry on talking to you for 3 hours, because it is the food industry is so weird. It's a very, very weird industry. It took me months to get my foot through the door. And even then, I happened by accident. It's almost impossible to get your foot into the door of this industry. It's almost impossible to get into the industry. So, you know, the fact that I'm now lucky enough to work inside it is amazing. And the people I meet always have fascinating stories. I love meeting anybody who has the time to talk to me. Definitely seeking investment, always looking. You know, this was a really scary thing that was brought home to me about a month ago. I've just been introduced to another brand owner, and their product was suddenly selling $500,000 worth every month inside Walmart. Just in Walmart, they were selling $500,000 worth of product, and she was on the phone to me in tears because she had no money. And you know, like, when you at the beginning, you think, well, all I need is to get to a point where I'm selling $500,000 worth of product into Walmart every month. But of course, if you sold $500,000 of product into Walmart last month, you need to have enough inventory on hand to sell $1 million worth of product into Walmart next month. Then sometimes you don't get paid. Walmart always paid me incredibly promptly, you know, so I'm certainly not suggesting they didn't, but you've got to have bigger and bigger amounts of money available on hand to pay for this stuff. So my journey isn't happening like hers is, for sure. Things are happening much more slowly for me, but we all need money, you know, until you become General Mills or Kraft Heinz. It's a struggle.
And if someone wanted to reach out to you to talk about the product or talk about possibly working with you, where can they reach you? Is there an email address or some?
Yeah, I mean, they can either. Yeah, there's an email form on our Instagram account or on our website. Either, you know, the website is noshiforkids.com, so they can find me quite easily. Okay.
Well, Tomo, it's a fascinating story. It's been a fascinating journey, and I'm just awed by the perseverance and the adaptation that you've had to make. Some of it because you wanted to, some of it because of things that were just out of your control.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that eventually that perseverance and that drive to succeed is going to result in great things for you. I have no doubt about that. And I look forward to hearing the end of the story, which is going to be a great success story, because we're still in the middle of the story right now, hopefully towards the end.
Yeah, we sure are. Thank you so much, Howard. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of On the Mark. I started this podcast by quoting John F. Kennedy and would like to end it with quoting one of my favorite baseball players, Nolan Ryan. Enjoying success requires the ability to adapt. Only by being open to change will you have a true opportunity to get the most from your talent. I wish you success in staying ahead of the curve instead of behind the 8 ball. Thank you for tuning in.